Thank you all so much for coming. Again, I'm Daniel Shaw, one of the co-founders and death doulas at the Virtual Death Doula Network. And I'm going to welcome you all to join me in a little box breathing to sort of ground and center us. And that box breathing is just a exercise where we breathe in for 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds, breathe out for 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds. And we'll just do that a couple times. It'll be wonderful and centering, and I will just guide us gently for about a minute of that, and then we will get on from there. So find a comfortable place to sit if you're not already, and keep your eyes open or gently close them. But I invite you to breathe in, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, exhale, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, inhale, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, exhale, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, inhale, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, exhale, 2, 3, 4. Thank you. Thank you so much. I feel better. Yeah, so the main focus of our Death Salon this month is to welcome Christy Scott and give her an opportunity to talk to you about what she does as the death planner. So with that, Christy.
Thank you. Hi everyone, nice to see all your faces. It's a real privilege to have been asked to speak at this death salon for the virtual death doulas. And I hope what I'm going to talk to you about you find interesting, and maybe you can integrate it into your personal lives or your work as death doulas, or just to give you some food for thought, really. So I'm sure you're already aware that I'm here to talk about end of life planning, and well, I prefer to call it death planning. And I'd like to just tell you a bit about my background first before we get started, so you can see why I do what I do. And please forgive me if I look down at my notes, but I don't want to miss anything important for my talk today. So as Daniel said, I'm Christy Scott, and my business is called The Death Planner. And I launched the company just under a year ago now. Prior to that, I worked as a full-time funeral director for a large company in the UK, and I still do funeral directing as and when I can, because I absolutely love it. But my main focus now is the death planner, and the death planner came about because I always found it, or I still do find it, heartbreaking when families come in to the funeral home to plan for their loved ones' funerals, and they don't know what their loved ones' wishes were. Not a clue, don't have a clue, and people would often look at me, you know, as if I would miraculously have the answer as to whether their late Aunt Jane or their Uncle Bob wanted to be buried or cremated. But obviously I couldn't give them that answer, and the families had to make the decision, ultimately had to make that decision themselves as to what their loved ones, whether they were buried or cremated, and what type of funeral they wanted. And I think it's quite a tough call to have to live with that decision when you don't know whether you've actually granted your loved one's final wishes. So from these scenarios, I sort of set about trying to create a one-stop death shop if you like, somewhere that people could go to access and prepare as many or as little of their death planning documents as they wanted to. And forgive me if I think you all know what death planning is, but death planning, I think, simply are just plans that you make in advance of your death, whether you're poorly, you're terminally ill, or whether you just want to get everything prepared for, you know, in case anything happens in the future. And there are many areas to do with death planning, but I'm just going to talk about a couple of them today. Some of the what I think are the most important areas, and they include so the legal side of death planning, what I'd call the digital dimension, so the digital estate planning area, and the everyday area, so some of the things that go into sort of the housekeeping of death planning. Now, obviously, end-of-life decisions can be extremely overwhelming, but I really do believe that once you've made your plan and you've made your decisions and they're documented, and you've spoken to people about them, that you get sort of a peace of mind, and you can go forward and live more clearly and with more clarity. I think that's because you've really controlled as much as you can after you've gone, and I think also that there are a number of psychotherapy studies out there that suggest that if you think about death regularly, you become a better person, you become less money orientated. Apparently it raises your self-worth, and it also can even make you a funnier person, apparently. So if I start with the legal side of things, what most people think about when you say legal and end-of-life planning is will writing. Now, most people tend to think that if you go to write your will, that you're immediately going to drop down dead. It's almost tempting fate to put a will in motion. Now, obviously, that doesn't tend to happen, but what does happen a huge amount is that people don't write their will, and then they die suddenly, and then all hell can break loose with the family and, you know, what you've left behind. Now, obviously, you'll be dead, or your client will be dead, but I just think it's a huge kindness to be able to leave your family members and your loved ones with some sort of direction as to what you wanted after you die. So writing a will enables you to leave your estate and all your assets to people that you choose. But within a will, you can also formalize a lot of other areas that people aren't always aware of. So areas such as guardianship, so who would look after your children if you were to die. You can put details in there about your funeral wishes, as much or as little as you like. You can include choices on organ donation, detail about pet care, and you can even include a list of people that you'd wish to exclude from your will. Unfortunately, I see a lot of people that have fallen out with family members and things, and more often than not, there's an exclusion list somewhere within a will. But it's really important stuff. And alongside a will, and I don't know whether you do this in the States, but we can include a letter of wishes. Letter of wishes isn't a legal document, but it is purely what it says. It's a letter that you write to sit with your will that lays out all of the wishes that you have for your executors to carry out. there's no real reason why this letter of wishes shouldn't be followed. If you've chosen somebody that you really trust to execute your will, then this letter of wishes should also be carried out, and can include things like, you know, if you wanted to leave a specific piece of jewelry to somebody and the reasons for that. If you had written people letters that you wanted given to them once you'd passed away. You can include more detail in there about your funeral, be that music, what you want people to wear, and more details for the upbringing of your children. So things like what school you'd want them to go to, what type of religion you wanted them to follow, but it purely is a letter of wishes. So it's a list of things that you'd really like followed. But like I say, that's not a legal part of the document, but it's a really nice thing to do. It can be quite emotive to actually sit down and write a letter like that. Another part of the legal side of documents, I don't know if you've heard of lasting powers of attorney. So these are the two different documents covering health and welfare and property and financial affairs. And therefore, if you lose mental capacity, it gives somebody else the power to make decisions on your behalf. And I know when people think about losing mental capacity, they often think of it being, you know, just for the elderly. But in the UK alone today, there are 42,000 people under the age of 60 with dementia. And there are so many other ways as well that you can lose mental capacity through a brain injury, a road accident, and the loss of mental capacity doesn't have to be permanent. You know, it could be temporary for a week, couple of days, but if you have these documents in place, then it ensures that there is somebody that you trust that can carry out any of your financial and health and welfare decisions on your behalf. Things like whether you agree to life-sustaining treatment, so whether you would want to be on a life support machine, if there were things that you didn't agree with in regards to different procedures that you wouldn't want carried out, different medicines that you didn't want to take. There's so much that it encompasses, but they are really, really important documents. And I think most of the people that I deal with have an automatic feeling that these decisions pass to their next of kin, so their husband or their children, but unfortunately that's not the case at all. There's no right to make decisions on somebody else's behalf. So if you say your husband got taken into hospital and lost mental capacity, then it wouldn't be yourself that made the decisions, it would be the doctor that made those decisions for him. Moving on to the digital dimension. So this is, you know, digital estate planning. It's becoming more popular, it's becoming more talked about, but not a lot of people currently consider this to be important. I know when I go on appointments and I speak about it, when I talk about wills and things, it's sort of poo-pooed and people don't really give it the time of day. But, you know, when so much of our lives are lived virtually, and, you know, we're in that mindset that we're supposed to keep our passwords super secret and super safe. I think, unfortunately, if you were to die suddenly, your family are likely to discover that they can't access any of your life in the digital realm, and that can have a huge impact. And I know there have been many cases against Apple, as an example, for people trying to get back photographs and just being able to close accounts, the simplest of things that people just can't do without these passwords. So I would always suggest that in order to save, you know, extra pain and stress at the time of your death or your client's death, that you sit down and make an in-depth digital plan. I think the latest figures are that the average consumer has between 90 and 200 online digital accounts. Mostly, that, you know, many would have separate usernames and passwords. So I think even if you take the lower figure, you know, that's a huge number of online accounts that you wouldn't be able to access. And, you know, in the digital plan, you include things like details on social media accounts, online bank accounts, very important, you know, the list of passwords and usernames, but also things like any valuable financial accounts you have, so any Bitcoin or cryptocurrency often gets lost when somebody dies. And obviously, emotionally, the emotional side, the emotional importance, there's the photographs and the emails and things on phones or email accounts. And obviously the digital platform is ever increasing. So I think this is a huge area that's really important. Can take rather a long time to sit down and put all together, but I think once you get started, it's definitely something that needs to be thought about. One of the everyday areas, sorry, that I deal with, or I do with clients, is something called Swedish death cleaning. Now, it's a relatively new concept, especially in the UK. Obviously, came about from Sweden, but it involves removing unnecessary items from your home, supposedly to obviously leave the home in an orderly state before you die. Now, obviously, you can have a clear out, or whatever you call it, at any point in your life. But I think if you're ill, or you know, you're getting to an age where you think you know, it's time to have a declutter, I think it's an excellent thing to be able to do. I know that I've been an executor on somebody's will, and I've had the task of clearing out their house once they died, and it's a horrendous task. You know, the sheer amount of stuff that you don't know where it's to go, whether you should chuck it away. And I think the difference between a general declutter and death cleaning is that with death cleaning, you can sit with somebody and go through the house and go through all your belongings, and you can either choose to get rid of them at that point, or you can label them for when you die, for who you want to inherit those items. As a doula, you could sit with your customer and go through things and make a note of who they want to receive what once they've died. And it's just again a huge kindness, I think, on the loved ones you leave behind, to be able to do that before you actually pass away. In order to bring all of those areas together, and like I said, there's lots of other things included in end of life planning, but I often advise my customers to make, well, I call it a death box, but you could call it a death file or an end of life box. And you can keep all the essential paperwork in there that you've created, let somebody know where it is, and then ultimately you've given your loved ones a roadmap for when you've gone. Just you know, the one point of call that they go to, and they know where everything's going to be, and where to access everything. But as well as doing the death box, I must say that it's really important also to tell your wishes to somebody verbally, because you can also explain a lot in a death file, in paperwork, but it's always good to speak to somebody as well, speak to the loved one that you want to carry out your wishes, just so that, you know, they know for sure how to carry out your wishes once you're gone. And also make sure that you you do regular reviews of the paperwork. But now I know obviously if you've got clients that are poorly, they may not have the time to review or the need to review documents. But if people have an illness that's, you know, a progressive illness, you know, their plans and ideas and decisions can change throughout that illness and how that illness evolves. And just through growing older, your ideas can change and your wants and needs. So I always say to review them at least sort of every 12 months. Just go back through things, make sure there's no more passwords to update. It really is sort of a work in progress. I did actually read that there's a charity in the UK, an end of life charity, that stated 90% of people think that death planning is essential. However, only 14% of people actually ever formally do anything about it. I think particularly, you know, to all the doulas that are here, just being able to offer some of this knowledge or resources is key really to enhance your overall doula package that you give to people, and the support that you give them. You know, even if you're just planting the seed as to what they need to think about, maybe, you know, just give them the push to start some of the tasks. You're just giving them that information that if they want to take that opportunity, they can take matters further. Unfortunately, there is a cost to some of the documents, obviously, especially the legal documents to create, so the wills, the lasting power of attorneys. I don't know about America and the other side of the world, but I know in the UK, if you associate yourself with a will writer as opposed to a solicitor or a lawyer, you will save your clients a huge amount of money. The will writer is just as qualified to do these documents for you. But I think if you also get a relationship with somebody, they'll also be able to create a much more personalized, empathetic service for your clients. And, you know, the people that I align myself with, I know that, you know, they've been so much happier with the personal side that I've been able to offer them as opposed to the solicitor. Will writing and lasting powers of attorney are just sort of small fry for some solicitors and lawyers. It's you know, I'm passionate about will writing, and I do it because of how important I think they are, and I think getting that personal service is really important. But I think I've spoken enough now, actually. And I just wondered, really, just out of curiosity, if, you know, what are your experiences personally with death planning? You know, have you got death plans in place for yourselves, or do you find that a lot of your clients, if you're doulas, have they an interest in death planning, or is it something that they find really hard to sort of get started? What are people's views on that sort of that side of things? Anyone?
Thank you, Christy, for that very informative presentation. We would love for anyone to answer that question right now, or if you have any comments. Shalissa, I see you raising your hand. You can unmute yourself if you'd like.
Perfect, thank you. I actually created a death plan with my grandmother when she was terminally ill. I actually took a leave of absence from work, and I lived with her sort of as her death doula before I knew what that was. We discussed everything. So everything in her house, we had different colored stickers for every family member. We went through, we got all of that worrying afterwards out of the way, and I felt like she could more focus on herself. which was really nice. She explained all of her wishes for me, for afterwards, and for time of death. So it was really nice. It felt really great to be able to honor all of those things for her. She did not want a funeral. She wanted an Irish wake. So just kind of a party. So some family members, there was some tension with that. And I made sure, you know, this was really what she had wished for, and everyone kind of came together to make that happen for her. So
Brilliant. And you know, obviously, like you say, if you hadn't have done all of that planning before, she, you know, it's not likely she'd have got her Irish wake, would she? Those family members would probably have overridden what she wanted.
yeah.
Anyone else?
I would just like to answer Shelley's question. She asked if anyone knows if we have will writers in the US and are they viewed as legal. So in the US, actually, a doula can help you write your will. You can write your own will. And instead of having a lawyer do it, what will happen is you will write the will. You would have two uninterested witnesses, so two people that are not included in the will, and then you would have it notarized, and then that would be legal. You can also do a will via something like LegalZoom for about $90, and a doula can walk you through it, and it is relatively quick and painless and covers all of the necessary components if you're looking for something with more structure. But yes, Shelley, absolutely, doulas can write wills for you. You can write your own will. There's a lot of options for that.
Would anyone else like to answer, ask a question or have a comment?
I have a question.
Okay.
My internet's gone. Great. Do you recommend, Christy, do you like any particular like online apps for planning or collecting information? Is there any that you like? Apps or digital places to store?
I was going to say there's quite a few digital estate planning apps. I think there's a new one called Biscuit Tin, but they're, again, I'm quite old-fashioned, that I quite like to have it in my hand. So paper format is always brilliant, and I think it can be a working document then, and you can amend it, change it, throw it away, start again. And I think to have it on an app is just another access issue ultimately. But the younger generation do like an app, so there are lots out there. I don't recommend any in particular. Like I say, I know there's one called Biscuit Tin that's just taking off. But you have to, I think you need to be very careful, because if you upload all your photos and everything, I think then you have to be careful about how you get them back. You know, there is a cost obviously to them storing your information. So I think just keep it simple.
There's also one called Cake. I don't know why these are all like cookie dessert things, but it's one called Cake. And I've personally met with them, and I have looked at their app, and they're based, I think, in New York, but that's just one option. But I'm of the same kind of belief of Christy here, but I do know that some people prefer apps or digital things. So Cake is one that I know of. There's a fair amount of activity in the chat box. I'm just going to read a few of these. Someone says that I recently learned that in Alberta, Canada, of holographic wills, so wills that are handwritten in their entirety and witnessed by two others who are not beneficiaries and can cost nothing. And then she also says, however, doulas in Canada do not help write wills. I'm currently training as one, and we are repeatedly being told that we do not do legal stuff. We can only direct the client to services available. Yeah, I guess it's just important to check what is happening in your area, your state, your country, and find out that way. But it can be really difficult to wade through everything, I know. Does anyone else want to add anything to this discussion before we move on?
Obviously, if anybody's got any questions or, feel free to, I'll put my email address and my Instagram on here. If you've got any questions about anything, then I'm more than happy to answer
We're
or
also
help.
gonna have a more general Q&A at the end of this call. So if you think of any questions in the meantime, you can save your question for the end of the call.
Yeah, thank you so much, Christy. And actually, Emily, do you want to go into your talk now about a doula's role postmortem?
Yeah, our format, this is the first time we're trying this little format with a speaker. So thank you so much, Christy, for being our first formal speaker. I couldn't think of anyone better to do that. But usually we do, Daniel, Andrea, and me do a longer talk, but this time, since Christy did the presentation, we're just going to do really quick things today. So I just want to very quickly talk about the roles of a doula post-mortem. So when you think of a doula, normally people think about pre-death, so doulaing a client pre-death, and then as death is occurring, and then afterward, not really having much to do. But what is the role of a death doula after death, if you are going to have a role? So the first thing is, it can be as varied and intricate as the people and the families that we serve. So every client, every family, every situation is very different. You just want to remember that. Ideally, the contract will be set out in its entirety right from the get-go. So of course, things are going to evolve and change as you work with your client and get to know your client better. But ideally, we do want to set out very clear boundaries from the beginning, that this is the contract, this is when it will end. You want to kind of figure out, do you want the contract to end at death, or do you want it to continue on with the family and help oversee things at the after death post-mortem period? I also want to say that not every doula is going to feel comfortable or just want to do post-mortem work. So that's totally something that you can decide as a doula. Do I want to offer post-mortem support, or do I want to just doula my client until death and that's all I want to do? So once the obligations of our contract have been completed, we typically don't continue on offering additional assistance to the family apart from agreed upon services. I kind of already said that, but I personally draw a line there. If the contract doesn't extend past death, I do not offer any formal services to the family. I might send like a card, send my condolences, but I'm pretty strict about that. If I do want to continue on with the family, I'll make a separate contract with them so that everything is mapped out and we know what's going on. So that all being said, the potential roles of a doula postmortem can be overseeing arrangements such as funerals. So if the client has chosen you to be, integral in the funeral, whether it be a home funeral or more traditional funeral, that can be a role if the client wanted you involved in that. Disposition, legacy projects, matters of the estate, these are all reasonable expectations of the death doula. However, these steps may require additional professionals, or they may be solely done by other people and simply overseen by the doula. So sometimes I like to think of myself as like a glue, or like the water that is running around everyone else, or like an eagle flying above and seeing everything that's happening. It's really, really, really handy to have just someone looking out for every aspect of the death situation, so you can catch things and orchestrate things, because of course people are in this highly sensitive state of grief, and it can just be very helpful. So a doula may serve as just that point person, kind of like an event planner. A doula with an understanding of the inner workings of the family dynamic is very helpful. Different medical professionals, the legal system, religious frameworks, and how all of these moving parts function within this whole system during that time of grief. But ultimately, as doulas, we serve our clients however they wish to be served at the end of life and beyond. And yeah, it can be really different. So I want to leave my question at the end here pretty open. If you have any questions about any of what I just said about end of life and beyond death. Or we can save it for the end of discussion, the Q&A.
Thanks, Emily. Yeah, we'll continue on because Andrew's going to talk about getting started on death planning and stuff like that. At this point, I think we'll just kind of roll through with these quick ones. Andrea, you're muted.
All right, thank you, Daniel. I am Andrea Sugar, co-founder and doula at the Virtual Death Doula Network. And today I'm going to talk briefly from a doula's perspective, as well as a family member's perspective regarding end-of-life planning. In my experience as a doula, the very hardest part of end-of-life planning is actually getting started. The act of creating a will or advanced life directives in actuality doesn't take a tremendous amount of time. I can draw up a basic will in about a half an hour. We can create advanced directives in a similar amount of time. So what makes it so challenging? I don't think that it's the time commitment, though I do acknowledge parts of it can be really tedious. The sticky point isn't in the doing, it's in the starting. One of the things I always begin with when I get to know a new client is to ask if they have a will or advanced directives in place. The answer most commonly is no. Despite it being a natural jumping off point, I bump up against a lot of resistance when attempting to start this portion of the work with the client. I think it makes the idea of death and dying very real, particularly from an emotional perspective, as we're considering how it may impact not only the person, but who's left behind. It can be arduous to think about what will happen to the people left behind and overwhelming to disperse beloved items between them. It can be difficult to make the choices that go along with advanced directives, especially if more than one loved one is also experiencing resistance to the discussion. It's okay that this step is scary, but once the initial step is taken, the rest of the process flows relatively quickly, and doulas are very effective in assisting in both getting started and finishing the process. Conversely, when end-of-life planning falls by the wayside, the impact can be devastating to those left behind. In my personal experience, my mother neglected to keep her will up to date. She made significant changes, but she never made them legal. She did not finish the process. And this left me with unexpected and unwanted legal and emotional entanglements that I am still unwinding almost 6 years later. I cannot state enough how important it is to follow through with this paperwork, not only for your own peace of mind, but for your loved ones as well, because it really can be devastating when you are mourning and grieving to also have to deal with some of these legal and other matters that are just challenging. And so the question I have for everyone is, what feels hardest for you about starting this sort of work, and how can we help? Where do you feel the most resistance or stickiness? Where does it feel the most challenging? And again, you can answer now, you can throw stuff in the chat, or you can wait until after Daniel does his short.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks, Andrea. Mine will take mine. I'm just gonna have a quick anecdote about my own experience, and then we'll launch into all the final Q&A and discussion and everything like that. And it's just sort of my experience with end-of-life planning with my own family. Because despite being an end-of-life doula, I didn't actually choose to initiate the discussion about wills or any end-of-life planning with my father, who turned 75 this summer. I was lucky that he reached out to me on his own last year, which was fantastic. I mean, I was thrilled to know that he had taken care of this for himself and for the rest of the family. I was a little bit shocked and caught off guard initially when I got the email asking to be his medical power of attorney. I hadn't really given much thought to him dying just yet. But even as a doula, I was just blind to the need to take care of this sort of thing within my own family. On the plus side, being a doula and being relatively comfortable with death and dying, I was able to quickly recover from my shock and send off an email accepting his offer to do so. I realized that I was actually relieved that he had decided both to take care of his end of life wishes so explicitly and to include me in that decision. And I've got like a ton of gratitude that he did. So that's just sort of like, that's my personal experience with this sort of thing. And I'm, you know, it can go well. So thanks. And on that note, thank you all for this concludes the us speaking to you portion, and we are moving on now to more general Q&A or discussion about whatever we want. Andrea posed a good question right before I said my piece there. Andrea, do you want to restate that?
Pardon, yeah, if anyone has anything they'd like to add or ask, or just talk about kind of what is so sticky about this end of life planning, because even though it is daunting, it is the thing that is going to provide comfort all around. It's like, oh, Shalisa, I'm gonna unmute you.
Thank you.
Sure.
So I feel like for some folks, it might be daunting as they don't want to offend any loved ones. Would you recommend as a doula, when you meet with your client, you know, when they start building these end of life plans, including their family members in those discussions as they're building the end of life plan?
Only if they want to. End of life planning is really personal, and that's actually one of the things that's really great about being able to work on it with a doula, because we can really tailor it to exactly what the person wants. And we can also, one of the things we can do post-mortem is if a person has wishes and say, hey, you know, I would like this to happen afterwards, then we can have a letter, or we can have an email or an amendment to their will. You know, we can have it notarized so it's legal, so that in case something changes, we have that. But it is so personal that if they'd like to involve their family, they can, but you know, but they don't have to do anything. You could actually do all your end of life planning completely by yourself and tell no one, and they can just find out at the time of death. That's a great question. Thank you.
I was going to say, from personal experience, I think what puts some people off is how emotive a lot of the documents are. And I can only imagine as a doula, if you've got a client that's really quite poorly, that it could be, you know, really, really draining on them. And I guess it would take, you know, a number of weeks, or, you know, you'd have to spread out doing death planning over a period of time, as opposed to getting it all done if they're not very well.
Yeah, and one of the things that we suggest and we tell people all the time is that you don't actually need to be dying to have a death doula. And honestly, the best time to get your advance directives in place and your will is at a time where there's absolutely nothing wrong. And I cannot stress that enough, because you're going to be in a more capable mental and emotional space, because you're able to make these decisions for what will happen. You're making a decision about how you want to live. Advanced directives aren't necessarily about dying. They are about how you want to live and how you would want to continue living. And so again, I can't stress enough the importance of doing these things before they're needed.
I have had a couple of people that have done their death plans when they're perfectly okay, no illness or anything. And I've had a couple of people that have then gone on to be diagnosed with cancer. And they've come back and put in a huge amount more detail. I think, you know, when you're okay, you do a death plan and it's quite basic. You know, you've got, you know, what you'd want if you were brain dead, or all those sorts of things. But I think when you're actively dying, I think you put a lot more meat on the bones. You go into a lot more detail with, you know, things like music, things like how you know, where you want to be when you die, and all sorts of things. So I think, like you say, it's a great time to do a death plan when you're well. But I do think once, you know, if you get the chance to redo it if you're poorly, then you get a lot more input into it then.
Joanna, did I see your hand? Go ahead.
Yes, hi, this is my first time here. Lovely to be with you all. I consider myself an end-of-life educator, and what you're talking about is exactly my focus is, opening up the possibilities for people to do end-of-life planning before they have need of it. I mean, we all have need of it, but it often takes a trigger, whether, like in my case, my dad died, and we had conversations. My mom died, we hadn't, and his, how I feel about his death is so much different than how I feel about my mom's. And so telling that story is one way that I try to impress upon others the benefits of doing this kind of planning while you don't need it. But any ideas that other people have for how do you get across the idea that this is something we can do when we're healthy, that would be helpful to me.
Thank you, Joanna. It's such a big point, and it's one that we as doulas both work really hard to do and struggle with, because people are quite resistant to it.
I'm just thinking of, like, with my example, my father reaching out to me, and how did we start with getting folks to do this? It's just sort of, I'm thinking about who I can talk to personally in my life that it might be beneficial to do that. So, like, I mean, it starts with us, like, we're here having this conversation and everything like that. Who do you know that, or I mean, maybe even yourself, if you haven't done your end of life planning yet, that's a great place to start. And if you do know folks that maybe should and haven't gotten around to it yet, this might be the universe prompting you to mention it.
I always think that, you plan for everything else in life you plan for. You have baby showers for babies that aren't even here yet. You create birth plans. You plan every minute detail of your life, except this, big finale. And I just think that, and I get people who, I can't write a will because it's, a couple of £100, and you think, well, you've got an estate worth sort of £500,000, yet you're not prepared to protect it. It's crazy. I just think you plan for everything else. It's just something else that you plan for.
I think that our role as educators and aware people and doulas is just what we're doing now, just talking about it, because just simply talking about it or just asking questions casually, even though it might feel a little uncomfortable, is huge, because in the West particularly, we all know we don't really talk about it, so it's uncomfortable and we tend to shy away from discomfort. So I think as we talk about it more, as we ask more questions and normalize it and just, what the heck, just talk about it, we'll get these answers and we'll get the ball rolling with some people. For example, my mom, she's very open about everything else, but a couple years ago, she would never ever have talked to me about like where her death stuff is, her death box, if you will. But since I've been doing end of life work, we casually have conversations about her dying all the time. And it's amazing that we can be so open about it. And I think that we can have more of those openings, those relationship kind of building conversations, and have people start to plan more if we just try to talk about it more. So we're all doing a great job.
Yeah, I guess you're exactly. Like, we're talking about it and normalizing it. We're all here having this conversation, and we can take this from here and talk about it with others. I mean, obviously, be aware of who you're talking to and everything, but it's not going to kill you. Ha ha ha. Pun intended. Yeah.
I see Dam's got your hand raised. I'm gonna unmute you. And please feel free to go for it.
Hi, thanks. I'm the one from Alberta, Cassandra. So yeah, thanks. This has been amazing. It's the first one I've been to. As I said, I'm training to be a doula, and this whole idea or challenge of getting people to talk about end of life plans is always So I'm an academic. I teach art history. My area has always been in and around artistic practices in non-artistic environments. So education, research, and death. I've worked with hospices in the past doing legacy projects. And so I do find talking about art and using humor is a great way to introduce the topic to people. But one of the things I'm seeing more and more of is my students in first year, second year, and third year university are really, really keen to talk about it. And this was happening before COVID, but since COVID, they really have a lot of anxieties and they are looking for safe spaces. So one of the things that we're working on, I actually have a third year student who is working specifically on creating death cafes for young adults that are art focused. So they actually have 3 really simple art-based activities that the youth will do and get them thinking and talking about death that way. And the other thing I do is I actually run a third year course for art students on designing memorials based on art history. So I really feel like we're right at this sea change where this whole area isn't just for those of us who are a little more open-minded or have had experiences and we want to talk about it. But I feel like it's a growing industry, which is a weird thing to say. But I think that it's growing in a really, really good way. And I'm hoping that we can expect younger, healthier people in their prime looking to think about this in much more positive, healthy ways. And I think what you guys are doing is a great start. So thank you very much.
Thank you. That is incredible. And what you're doing sounds incredible. We would certainly love to hear more about it if you want to shoot us an email, just because that sounds amazing. And, you know, coinciding with that, we have found that especially since COVID, one of the services we offer is grief and death anxiety support. And we have worked with a lot of people that are not dying at all, but they have anxiety about the idea of death or about a family member dying, or they don't know what to do with their grief. So one of our services is the grief and death anxiety support. And we see that a lot, particularly with younger people or people that are just not sure how to move with this. So I love that. And I see that, you see a similar thing, and it sounds like you have a wonderful way for people to express that outside of verbal words.
I had a client for about 3 months who was younger than me. I think he was 25, and we would meet every week, and his issue was that he was terrified that he didn't know what was going to happen after he died. And that was paralyzing him in every way, because he felt that death was uncertain. He might not be anything. He just didn't know what was happening. So we met every week, and we basically just did like some creative writing prompts every week and really worked through his fears. And he at the end sent me an email and said, "No offense, I don't need you anymore." And he went on to do his advanced directives and everything, and he was only 25. So I think that's really cool. Does anyone else want to ask a question or make a comment, share a story?
All right, I guess we'll wrap it up then. Thank you all for joining us today. And especially Christy Scott, thank you so much for being our first guest speaker at one of our death salons. You've been awesome and amazing with all the stuff that you brought here today. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We we are a nonprofit and operate on donations as well as payments that we get from our clients. If you want to donate, I'm putting our PayPal link in the chat right now. It is tax deductible. I think that's all. I mean, Andrea, Emily, do you have anything you'd like to say?
I would like to add just about the donations. Our donations go directly to assist people that are not able to access care, and we are committed to providing care for anyone. And I wanted to share something really profound that was made possible because of donations. I have a very young 24-year-old client, and she wants to donate her body to science, but at the end of that, they cremate you, and she's very environmentally conscious. And so that didn't work. And so what I was able to do is find someone who's willing to do a green cremation, which turned out to be incredibly expensive. And so because of the kindness of others, we were able to cover all of the costs for this green cremation to make my clients' dying wishes come true. And so I just really can't thank people enough for contributing. And I want to let you know that this is directly how these contributions work. And it was a really powerful moment to be able to make something like that happen for her and her family.
Thanks for sharing that, Andrea.
Thanks, Emily.
Yes, we really, really, really appreciate the donations. Thanks, Daniel, for putting that in the chat. If y'all have any questions at all, just get us on social media, get us on email. We do send out a newsletter every month if you want to sign up for that. If you want to auto enroll in these, what are we calling it? Auto sign up for these death salons every month. You can do that, and we will send a resources document to you all after, and we'll be asking Christy for some resources on her topic, and we'll be sending some links and things like that. So look out for that.
Including the link to this on YouTube. So
Link to this on YouTube. So you can see yourself on the internet.
And if you have any questions or you want to follow up, you can always email us at virtualdeathdoula@gmail.net. It's on our website. And we're always happy to chat.
Have a great day, everyone, or a great evening, great week.
Thank you again so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.